Good morning, dear friends. In 2016, on this very stage, I said, long live the troublemakers. Today, I want to say, long live the freedom fighters. Exactly 1 week ago, the Chinese government sentenced my friend and a prominent human rights defender, Guo Feixiong, to 8 years in prison. His crime was publicly appealing to China's leadership for permission to leave China to go to United States to spend the last minute with his dying wife. I leave to his son Peter to tell the story of his father and his family. 1 month earlier, the Chinese government handed it down to another two friends, two prominent leaders of China's citizen movement, Xu Zhiyong and Ding Jiaxi, prison sentences of 14 and 12 years, respectively. Their crime was a private meeting and a public statement criticizing Xi Jinping's COVID policy. These three cases are but the tip of iceberg of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP's persecution of the people of China. We have lost count of numbers of people languishing in China's prison for crimes of exercising basic rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Indeed, human rights violations have skyrocketed in China since Xi Jinping came to power. Under his rule, China continues to leave large fingerprints on the canvas of human events. Regarding human rights, these fingerprints place China at the scene of countless activities, both domestic and international, all thoroughly outside of the norm of civilized, responsible world power it so desperately claims to be. To review China's despicable human rights record, we need to look no further than communities that my fellow panelists represent today. Tibet faces new and worsening challenges from the CCP's repressive rule. Threats to Tibet's linguistic, religious, and cultural heritages have increased staggeringly in recent years. Now, as an example, an estimated 80% of all children in Tibet are separated from their families and educated in the massive system of colonial boarding schools. This cultural genocide is a deeply troubling manifestation of the CCP's ongoing program of forced assimilation of ethnic and religious minority groups. In 2019, 60 years after Tibet, an autonomy under the 1951 forced agreement of one country, two systems was fully colonized by the Communist China. Hong Kong, another autonomy under the one country, two system framework, was to be plunged under a national security law. It has rapidly lost its freedom, the rule of law, and civic culture, becoming another Shanghai in the political sense. This is a political genocide. Millions of Uyghurs, are suffering from unspeakable atrocities at the hands of the CCP. This includes forced sterilization of young women, enforced separation of families, and placement of children in state orphanages, and mass incarceration of more than 1 million people since 2017 in detention centers and forced labor camps. Uyghurs are also being transferred to factories in China proper and used as modern-day slaves. The case for genocide against the Uyghur people has been made through documentation of evidence by credible international human rights and academic institutions, as well as from numerous profoundly intimate and chilling first-person accounts. Today, we will hear one of them. Now I want to return to the 3 imprisoned democracy leaders mentioned at the beginning. For each of them, the current incarceration is not their first. For Xu Zhiyong and Ding Jiaxi, this is the second time. For Guo Feixiong, Peter's father, is 3rd imprisonment. This demonstrates that despite the extreme darkness, many in China have continued their fight for a brighter China. But their efforts and their sacrifices are often underappreciated, with many observers concluding that China will remain authoritarian indefinitely. But the perseverance, the determination demonstrated by these brave freedom fighters and the dramatic white paper movement of late last year, have shown change is possible. That change, however, requires international focus on and international support for the courageous people who demand struggle for freedom and democracy on a daily basis. Thank you for providing us the opportunity to speak truth to power. Indeed, as loving freedom individuals, organizations, and countries develop their strategies, policies with regard to engagement with China, they should listen to the people who share their values, the same values. Not only that, but also continue fighting on front line for these values. Now, let's hear our extraordinary speakers. Let me begin with Peter.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yang. So I am here today to speak for my father, Yang Maodong, who's more known for his pen name, Guo Feixiong. He is a writer, a publisher, and a self-taught legal activist, or barefoot lawyer, who championed freedom and democratic values in China. But because China is not free, because China is not democratic, he's been in prison for the majority of my life, 12 out of the last 21 years, and just a few days ago, he was sentenced to another 8 years in prison. I haven't seen him in person since I was 5 years old, and I don't know when or if I'm gonna see him again. This is my story, our story, of how the CCP tore our family apart. When I was young, I didn't know him as a human rights activist. I only knew him as my dad. When my mother was out of town, he would take care of me. One day, he just stopped coming home. I found it strange he would disappear like that. When I was 6, I was eager to go to elementary school with my friends. But my mom told me I was not allowed. I was sad and frustrated. A year later, I found out officials denied me education because of my father's human rights activism. Then, when I was 6, I was eager to go to As the Chinese government kept persecuting us, my father decided that we should move to the United States. I was only 7 at the time, and I barely spoke a word of English. But I was able to pick up the language and adapt quickly. During that time, my father was serving a 5-year sentence after publishing a book about a recent Chinese political scandal. In prison, he was beaten, shocked, and deprived of sleep for over a week, and tortured repeatedly. When he was released in 2011, we talked over the phone a lot. He encouraged me to exercise and read about Chinese history and Chinese literature. Come August 2013, he stopped replying to our messages. We were worried he was detained again, but the Chinese authorities were completely silent until a month later, when they announced he was imprisoned for gathering crowds to disrupt social order. This time, he was sentenced to 6 years. His health deteriorated. He couldn't trust the food he was given because he felt ill after eating. He began a hunger strike in protest. My mother was so worried that she reached out to American officials to send a request to the Chinese government for a prison transfer. It worked. He was transferred to another prison where he was treated better. His sentence ended 3 years later, in 2019. I was 18 then. I was much more interested in understanding his character and his beliefs. I wonder how he stayed motivated to keep working even after he was repeatedly arrested and imprisoned without a fair trial. He told me he's driven by his sense of duty. His honor, nonviolence, and fairness. And even after everything the CCP has done to him, he's loyal to his Chinese identity. He constantly reminds us that we might live in America for now, but we are Chinese. He is a Chinese activist who wants to reform China to make it a better place. He doesn't just want to westernize China. In January 2021, I was 19 years old. My mother was diagnosed with late-stage colon cancer. My sister and I were shocked and devastated, especially because for the last 11 years in America, she'd effectively been a single mother raising us. My father was desperate to see her, so he sent a letter request to the government to visit her. Of course, the Chinese government denied his request, but it did not deter him. He reached out to his contacts in the US to get her into the best hospitals possible. He asked for donations and fundraised online to help us pay for her cancer treatments. Chemotherapy was very hard on her, but she endured. She really wanted to see her husband again. She believed that with his tenacity and his connections, he'll make it happen. Just as she was starting her second round of chemo, he got his passports and visas corrected to come to the US. It gave my mother so much hope. But when he got to the airport, they wouldn't let him on the plane. He protested, and he was arrested and put in jail for a few days. When my mother heard this, she was devastated. As my mother's condition worsened, my dad had to make more drastic measures. He started to speak to famous activists about being denied the right to visit his wife, but then we stopped hearing from him. A month later, in January, she passed away without ever getting to speak to him again, nor knowing his whereabouts. She spent the last month on earth without her husband. When my mother was alive, she would always been his advocate. She was a doctor in China, but in the US, she worked minimum wage jobs to feed and house us. In her spare time, she would do everything she could to get me out of jail. Now, with my mother gone, it's up to me to fight for my father's freedom. 2 months after her death, the government finally announced his imprisonment for inciting subversion to state power. Upon hearing of her death, he started a hunger strike to protest China's refusal to let him see her. They force-fed him in prison. The only person he could see is his lawyer. He has lost a ton of weight. He is a man of average height, but by August 2022, he was just down to 48 kilos, or 105 pounds. That same month, we contacted officials and diplomats from several countries. They recognized his innocence and pushed Chinese officials to release him from prison. China mostly ignored these demands. They say he is in prison for subverting state power. But the truth is, he is in prison because he spoke up about being denied the right to visit his dying wife. Think of how cruel and inhumane that is. Every day in prison, he suffers. As a committee that values human rights, we must take action. Every time he's been in prison, he's been tortured so badly that he has no choice but to start a hunger strike. And just this week, he was sentenced to another 8 years in prison in a blatantly unfair trial. He is planning to appeal, but he needs international help. He needs your help. So I ask you to speak up, to take action on behalf of my brave father, Guo Feixiong, and defend the rights of this human rights defender. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Incredible story. Our next speaker is Dr. Giello. He is an academic expert on China's mass use of boarding schools to eradicate Tibetan identity and culture. Now, Dr. Giello.
Dear brothers and sisters, in 2015, I finished my PhD in the sociology of education at the University of Toronto. Then I returned to Tibet. Late next year, I got a phone call from my brother. He said, "Hey, Jialo, I need you to come back home to check on my two daughters. Strange things are happening with them. I don't know how to interpret it." On a Friday afternoon, I went to pick up my two grandniece from their boarding school. But this was not just boarding school. It was a boarding preschool. They were only aged 4 and 5 years old. And this was an entirely new policy in Tibet. When those two little girls got home, I closely observed them and the way they interacted with their family. They didn't hug anyone. There was no emotional exchange. They were silent, distant, and almost like a stranger or a guest at their home. And I'm here to tell you today that all of this is by design. China's mandatory boarding school will destroy Tibetan culture and identity if they are not stopped. Like a gardener ripping out the tree from the ground. The CCP is trying to completely cut off Tibetan children from their cultural roots in order to eradicate us forever. Around 1995, when I was teaching at a university, I noticed that my undergraduate Tibetan students were speaking Tibetan fluently in class. But when they turned into a written assignment, their grammar was strange. I asked why. They said, this is the way we learn from our school. So I got their textbook and I realized that they were poorly translated from Chinese textbook. I thought we must write our own textbook. I organized a group of people, the principals, professors, and the students, to ask how should we teach child literacy in Tibet. Together, we came up with an outline, and then it was my job to write the book. I collect oral history from different villages, transcribe it, and edit it. In 1999 and 2000, when we distributed the book to the school around Tibet, the kids were so happy. And their parents kept asking to borrow their book. Parents said, wow, your school is teaching this? You have to go every day. Their enthusiasm and the pride in our culturally relevant textbook and on our own language majorly increased daily attendance. In 2009, when I heard a rumor that China was planning a mandatory preschool program in Tibet for children aged 4 to 6, I thought we must get ahead of this. Let's bring everyone back together to discuss what we would want as a mother tongue-based curriculum and give our recommendation to the Chinese government. But I was in Canada when Xi Jinping announced a new preschool policy. It wasn't until I saw my grandniece that I realized that their boarding preschool curriculum was worse than everything we could have imagined. So for 3 years, I traveled across eastern Tibet, visited more than 50 boarding preschools, meeting with students, principals, and local people, and I was nearly identical to my grandniece's experience. Students are forced to speak in Mandarin. Teacher can only use the CCP-approved textbook. Every day, it's lesson like this, so when those 4 and 5 years old children got home, they have almost nothing in common with their parents. Nothing to talk about, almost like they were raised in a foreign country. When I asked my brother, what would happen if you don't send the girls to the boarding preschool? He teared up and said, the girls will be blocked from getting an education for the rest of their life. Even if most Tibetans don't agree with this policy or Beijing's curriculum, they have no choice. This is why 1 million Tibetan children are in boarding school today. And this number means that 3 out of every 4 school-age Tibetan children now live separate from their parents and in the control of Chinese state. As an educator, I can tell you that China's pedagogy is very advanced. They are brainwashing an entire generation of Tibetan kids so successfully that they won't know how to practice their own language, culture, and religion in their homeland. The Communist Party is trying to force our Tibetan children to become Chinese. If this continues, then China will end Tibet is a 5,000 years old civilization. In September 2020, after so many years of advocating for the right to receive a Tibetan education in Tibet, I began to face serious political consequences. I tried to fight this, but a well-known lawyer recommended that I live quietly right away before I'm in physical dangers. I was shocked. It feels so saddened, but I packed up all my things and had the last dinner with my family. I told them I can't stay here anymore. It is possible we won't see each other for the rest of my life. But I couldn't bear to tell my 80 years old father the truth. So I just said, I have to go, but I will be back soon. Today I live with my wife and daughter in Canada. And I have watched the Canadian Prime Minister and the parliamentarians and even Pope Francis apologize for forcing indigenous kids into the residential school. And yet today, in 2023, China is intentionally recreating the genocidal system in Tibet. And it's nearly 10 times the scale. The only thing that will stop Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party is the international pressure and the sanctions. We must force them to end this practice, or Tibet will cease to exist. Thanks very much. This my flag represents my whole nation.
Thank you. Tujiche. Thank you, Dr. Giolo, for your presentation. Our next speaker is Frances Hui. She is the first Hong Kong activist granted political asylum in the United States. She is a policy and advocacy coordinator of Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation and director of We the Hong Kongers organization. Now let's welcome Frances Hui.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here to share the story of Hong Kong and the friends in Hong Kong. Very happy to be speaking with you, and I hope you guys had learned more about China and the CCP with our panel speakers today. I want to start with a statement that a lot of you may find confusing or even controversial, which is Hong Kong has never been free. First, it was part of the Chinese Empire. Then it belonged to the United Kingdom for 150 years. And even in 1997, when the United Kingdom handed over Hong Kong to China, the people of Hong Kong were not consulted or included in the negotiations. Hong Kong has never been free. I was born in 1999, just 2 years after the handover, when Hong Kong became part of China as a special administrative region. China promised one country, two systems, so that Hong Kong will not change for 50 years and Hong Kong people are to run Hong Kong. To this day, Beijing and Hong Kong authorities had tried to paint a picture to make the world believe that Hong Kong is a free society, that it is an international financial center protected with rule of law. But the people of Hong Kong have woken up to these lies, and we are fighting for our democracy. My story starts when I was 10-year-old. I saw a documentary on TV about the Tiananmen Square massacre. I saw soldiers shooting at unarmed citizens and driving tanks into the crowd. I saw students covered in blood on makeshift stretchers, rows of bodies covered in sheets, excuse me, and a man curled up on a sidewalk in the fetal position with his skull cracked open. It is shocking no matter how old you are, but especially as a 10-year-old. So I went to the annual vigil on June 4th, and Hong Kong was the last place in China that could honor the victim. It was my first experience seeing people freely gather to express themselves, and it left a profound impression on me about freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, both values that define Hong Kong yet ceased to exist in mainland China. In the summer of 2014, when I was 15-year-old, the CCP announced a new election scheme to narrow the people's already limited rights to elect our chief executive. Student leaders like Joshua Wong called on students to walk out of classrooms and take to the streets and let their voice be heard. I joined the walkout with thousands of students. We rallied in front of the government's building headquarters and eventually occupied Hong Kong's busiest highway. That day, police launched 87 tear gas canisters towards students and peaceful demonstrators. They chased us, beat us, pushed us back again and again, but we didn't give up. We wore helmets and goggles, held umbrellas to shield ourselves from pepper spray. All we could think about was standing our ground against police aggression. I was beaten with a police baton, and I was pepper sprayed in the face. As I was standing in the midst of tear gas smoke, I looked at the people fighting alongside me for the same democratic values. I saw there was a community built up where strangers looked out for each other and became neighbors in tents. We were all there to defend our home and our freedom because we are Hong Kongers. I am a Hong Konger. And although we never achieved universal suffrage, this movement completely changed my life and the landscape of Hong Kong civic society. In 2019, the Hong Kong government proposed an extradition law that would violate our judicial independence to allow anyone in Hong Kong to be extradited to China and be put on trial under Chinese law. Millions of Hong Kongers took to the streets and came up with 5 demands: the extradition law to be repealed, justice for peaceful protesters who were detained, attacked, or died from police aggression, and the right to elect our own official as promised in the Basic Law. Once again, the government ignored the people's voice and increased state violence against protesters. Police started shooting straight into the crowd with bullets. They took siege of a university campus, blocking thousands of young protesters from food and medical assistance unless they surrendered. Throughout the movement, 11 people had died from committed suicide. Dozens of others disappeared, and over 10,000 people were arrested. Our city was deeply wounded. We were left together, glued together by pain, anger, and tragedy. And as a final insult to the people of Hong Kong, China imposed a national security law in 2020 to criminalize any individual under secession, subversion, terrorism, or collusion with foreign forces, facing up to life sentencing in Hong Kong or mainland China. Immediately, I was warned that I was on the government's shortlist of people who would be arrested. I was only 21-year-old, and I had to make this life-altering decision in 48 hours. I was torn just from thinking, should I stay in Hong Kong or leave? Would I really get life in prison, in solitary confinement? Or would it be better for me to leave Hong Kong and be voice of my friends in prison? Late at night, I decided to get on a plane, and I still remember as the plane took off, I was looking out to the lights of Hong Kong through the window, thinking, this might be the last time I will see this beautiful city, my home. And within weeks, they had imprisoned 47 of the most inspiring leaders from the movement. And now they're facing the possibility of life behind bars. Media outlets were forced to shut down, and journalists like Jimmy Lai was put in jail. So many Hong Kongers were forced to flee the city they call home. In 2021, I secured asylum in the United States. Meanwhile, there are thousands of political prisoners in Hong Kong, with the youngest only 13-year-old. The words political prisoners and political asylee are the two labels I never imagined would apply to Hong Kong people. But I'm afraid this is the reality of Hong Kong today, a reality that the Chinese government and Hong Kong government both try to cover up. And even when I am in the US, where I am supposed to be safe, me and my friends have been bullied, intimidated, threatened by the CCP. The same has happened to Hong Kongers, Uyghurs, Tibetans, Taiwanese, and Chinese dissidents all over the world. We cannot accept the status quo. We must hold China accountable and let Hong Kong be Hong Kong. CCP's authoritarianism is one of the biggest threats to world order and democracy, working next to other bad actors like Russia, Iran, and Burma, just to name a few. I don't want to ask the question about why China is still on the UN's Human Rights Council, because many of us have asked that question in the past too many times now, and it is still what it is. But the least that the international community can do is to advocate for the release of political prisoners in Hong Kong and alleviates their suffering. It only takes all of you sitting here today, world leaders, journalists, activists, and people of conscience, to say their names. Say Jimmy Lai's name. Say Joshua Wong, Gwyneth Ho, Owen Chow's names. Raise their public profile, make them famous, and put pressure on the CCP to release them. In the movement, we used to wave a flag that reads, "Restore the lights of Hong Kong." This is the revolution of our times. Today, this flag and the slogan are banned in Hong Kong. In 2016, the activist behind this slogan, Edward Leung, said, "It is always darkest before the dawn, but just know that the dawn is about to come." Today, years have gone by, and the dawn is yet to come for Hong Kong and for many of you here that are experiencing autocratic oppression. But I believe on the darkest day, we can all light a candle for one another to make the night brighter and warmer. Together, we can restore the lights of Hong Kong and the lights for this global pro-democracy movement, so that one day, all the political prisoners will be free, and we will be able to set foot again in our dear home, and we can declare united, glory to democracy and glory to Hong Kong. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis, for your powerful message. Next, we will hear Kabiner Siddiq. She is a Uyghur activist and witness to Chinese re-education camp atrocities and a survivor of forced sterilization.
Good morning, dear guests. I would like to thank you for your time. Right now, there are over 3 million people in concentration camps in East Turkestan. The government will say that those numbers are exaggerated, that they're re-educating Muslim terrorists and political dissidents. But it is a lie. I've worked inside those camps, and I'm here to tell you what I witnessed with my own eyes.
Xitoy hukumati hatto kiyishga cheklangan Uyg'ur atlaslarimizni kiyib turib, bu yerda shu jazo lagerlaridagi o'z ko'zim bilan ko'rgan ishlarni sizlarga qisqacha
By the end of my story, I think you'll agree there's only one word to describe what's happening in China: genocide.
Xitoy hukumatida Uyg'urlar yuzatgan bu dahshatli fojialarni tasvirlaydigan faqat bir so'z bor.
I'm a Chinese language teacher from East Turkestan, what the CCP calls Xinjiang. And after 28 years of teaching, on February 28, 2017, the president of my school called me into his office and said, "Go to the party committee office tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. You have an important meeting." I asked what about it, but he didn't know. I showed up and recognized a few other teachers from our district. The party secretary of Regional Education Department, Song Li Ying, closed the door and said, "We've just started a new semester and we've gathered a number of illiterates for you. Starting tomorrow, March 1st, you'll teach the national language, Mandarin Chinese, to them at designated locations. When you go there, don't tell anyone what you saw, what you heard, or what you knew. Keep it very confidential. Don't mention it to the school leaders, principals, or even your co-workers, friends, and your family members." I thought that was strange, but before I could ask, Song Li said, "Kalbenur teacher, your daughter is in the Netherlands, right? The Netherlands and China have very close relationship." I knew what it was, a threat. I had no choice but to accept their offer and stay quiet, so I signed my name and stamped my fingers with ink. The next morning, a police officer picked me up and drove me to the designated location. It was a 4-story building inside a compound with walls covered in barbed wire and a series of strong electric doors. The policeman tapped the card to let me in, and a female worker asked, "Teacher, are you ready? We can bring in the students." I said yes. On the right of the corridor, they unlocked 3 doors, one with an electronic keypad, one with regular padlock, and a third intertwined by wires. She shouted, "Class is starting! Class is starting!" And I saw that 97 so-called illiterate students coming out of their cells. They were older adults with chains on their hands and feet. My heart started pounding. I felt totally despair and hopelessness. But I was surrounded by armed police. "My name is Kalbenur," I said. "I will teach you the national language starting today." And then I quickly turned to the board to start writing Chinese vowels because I knew if I looked at them much longer, I would break down crying. Later in the lesson, I noticed 8 surveillance cameras in the room. It was the longest and scariest hours of my life in my teaching career. At 12 o'clock, we went outside, and the female workers said they were going to distribute the detainees food. "I want to help too," I said. They agreed. They started scooping out rice soup, but it was almost entirely water. I started handing out Chinese buns, 1 piece per person. I gave 2 elderly people an extra piece and didn't think it would be a problem until someone yelled, "A bun is missing." There was a momentary panic, but a worker said it must have been the kitchen's mistake. She told me everything is carefully counted and asked me not to help again because I almost put them in danger. I was horrified. As the weeks passed, there was a constant influx of new prisoners. I thought 6 to 7 hours a day to a different group every hour. From the numbers printed on their uniforms, there must have been over 7 to 8,000 detainees. They didn't shower. Each floor had just one toilet, and there was one limit to use them. And they slept on the cold concrete floor. One time, I went to pour myself a cup of tea, and a worker came running at me shouting, "Hey teacher, don't drink that." I asked why, but she didn't have a good reason. I started suspecting the water. Even the most healthy inmates were losing weight dramatically. Over time, many of my students disappeared. They allegedly died on the way to the hospital. After 6 months, my contract ended and I was so relieved. But then I was called for a new job. Starting September 1st, 2017, I teach at the women's camp in Tugang. It had 6 floors with at least 20 cells per floor, roughly 10,000 inmates in the building. At a simple glance, the women looked like men, wearing orange vests with numbers printed on them. Every Monday, they would be administered unknown medications. As a result, 90% of the women who are aged between 18 to 48 years old would stop menstruating. My Chinese friend told me that they would bring women in an interrogation room and force them to confess to crimes they'd never committed. Then 4 to 5 police officers would rape the girl one after another. They'd take an electric rod and stick it into her vagina or rectum to torture her. I was supposed to teach at the women's camp through March, but in November, I got sick. And when I went back to my school in February, I was forced to retire with the excuse that I didn't complete my duty. 2 months later, I got a message from the neighborhood committee and the police informed me that I have to go to the police station in Changloyan Hospital to undergo a sterilization surgery. All women aged between 18 and 59 must be subjected to birth control procedures, and if you don't get it done, you and your family would be punished. In October 2019, with my own efforts, I left for the Netherlands where my daughter lived. I started testifying in February 2020. After I gave interviews to international media such as The Guardian, BBC, CNN, my family started receiving threats, including my husband. On February 18, 2021, I got an unexpected call on WeChat from a Chinese police officer. He passed the phone to my husband, who was angry. He said, "I don't want to have anything to do with you. From today forward, we're divorced." I knew immediately that he was being forced to say that by the police. Then, 1 month ago, I found out that my older brother had passed away. He went to the hospital for a cold, and the next day he died under mysterious circumstances. The CCP won't just ruin your life, they will go after your entire family too. I can only say so much today, but let me be clear. The Chinese government is systematically torturing, sterilizing women, separating families, enslaving Uyghurs in forced labor factories, and murdering the people of East Turkestan. The Chinese government, again, is systematically eradicating the Uyghur people of East Turkestan. A genocide is unfolding against millions of Uyghurs and Turkic people. We cannot stay silent on this genocide. We must act. We have to stand against the Chinese Communist Party. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, as we watch the CCP routinely detain its best citizens, as we watch the Tibetan identity is gradually losing, as we watch the free Hong Kong is gone, as we watch the Chinese government kill Uyghurs in great numbers. We must stop watching and begin actions. We must stop China from committing these atrocities. When it comes to human rights, there's no such a thing as a neutral position. You must choose side. I am Yang Jianli. I approve this message. Thank you. Let's join me in thanking our speakers for their courage to share their difficult stories. Thank you.